Now, the strong growth of Nigeria's economy and ongoing reforms driven by the government is providing fresh opportunities for investment banking. At the FBN Capital's third annual investor conference themed Tomorrow's Nigeria Through Economic Empowerment, CNBC Africa's Didi Akinyelure spoke to Kayode Akenkugbe, Managing Director of FBN Capital, and discussed the economic empowerment through the private sector. Let's take a look.
This trend of economic empowerment, and that is empowerment of the private sector. I mean, we can see that in the whole power sector privatization. That process started in 2000 and really gained momentum, quite frankly, in the last 2 years. Now that the private sector is involved and has invested and put its own money, we are more confident that there will be some success in those areas. So for me, I think the critical thing is what government is doing, creating policies that are enabling, that are investor friendly. We heard today the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment speak about a number of these policies. Government recognizes its role. Government really should refocus and channel investments more towards social infrastructure and let the private sector deal with other forms of investment.
Now tell us a little more about the aims and objectives of this conference.
The objective remains the same when we started this series of conferences. The intention was to create a very conducive forum for key policymakers, regulators, and private sector to interact and engage in a way that we can think of the best and most innovative ways to drive development and stimulate growth in Nigeria. And I think if you look back to all the conferences we've had, first one from BRIC to BRINCS, the second one looking really at catalysts for growth, trying to identify the key enablers in the economy. And then today, Nigeria's Tomorrow through economic empowerment, which again is really speaking to the private sector, taking a more central role in trying to galvanize economic development. It's consistent with the theme of certainly creating that forum for people to exchange ideas. I think today we certainly had very, very informative and interesting and introspective presentations that hopefully will give the audience a bit of food for thought and the opportunity to go away and think about how to certainly do better. It's always very encouraging to hear people who are independent of the country show us sometimes some of the things that we sometimes fail to see because we're so immersed. But definitely, you know, it's to create an opportunity where people can believe there's a lot of potential to aspire for.
We're good to get your thoughts on the investment banking space, on what has changed and the plan going forward.
Investment banking is still, in this market, in its early stages of development, in fairness. The commercial banking community still dominates. But what we are beginning to see, particularly with the drive towards development of infrastructure and power sector reform, etc., is there is a funding gap. And that funding gap really speaks to what's going to be a key part of tomorrow's agenda, the conference, which is the non-bank asset management community. Because really, in order to fund long-term projects, you need long-term capital. This is not the traditional bread and butter of commercial banking. So really, we think the potential for investment banking is significant. Still at early stages. This year, for example, the capital markets have been fairly quiet on the primary side. But certainly going forward, we think it's a market that can only grow. And of course, FBN Capital, you know, fully intends to play a very dominant role in that whole development.